Welcome to the Journey Podcast. Or wait, start over. So the first question is, welcome to the Journey Podcast or YouTube channel. Just kidding. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am so happy that you guys are here today. And I have a lot of explaining to do, so let's just do it. Let's do it. So my name is Malia, and I have a podcast called The Journey Podcast. And if you guys are a listener, you know that it's been really inconsistent, and there's just a lot that goes into that. And so I'm switching my podcast over to YouTube. So this will be just a YouTube channel, but the podcast episodes will all be on here. And you guys will get bonuses. You'll get like other types of videos. Today, I'm just gonna share with you guys the story of the podcast, the mission, the purpose of it, and just share with you some of the anxieties that went with it and the different podcast hosting struggles and all those different things. So I'm super excited. Let me just talk about the podcast and why we're switching over. So I was using the podcast hosting called Buzzsprout. It's a really good podcast hosting, but I can no longer afford it, and YouTube is free, and so I can really share the content without having to worry about paying a monthly fee. So $12 at first wasn't that bad, but it adds $4 every single hour added. So with the package I had, you could only post, I think, 2 hours of content a month. And so I was posting way more hours of content. I would start to have like 40-minute long episodes, hour-long episodes, and that affected how much it was costing. So last month, it was $22. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but for someone who doesn't have a job at the moment, that was a lot. So here we are. We're gonna do this, and we're gonna work with what we have. From the beginning of this podcast, there was so many different struggles, and I feel like it's just been a struggle since I started it. Like in the beginning, it was because of anxiety. Like I remember trying to go up to the mic and try to record an episode and just be plagued with anxiety and overwhelming thoughts. So I didn't really get out content consistently. And at that time, I was using a free platform called Anchor. But when I transferred that over to Buzzsprout, that's when I had a little bit of more issues because I had to pay for it. And it's hard to transfer my Buzzsprout hosting to Anchor. And actually, let me explain how that works, because if you don't have a podcast, that might be confusing. When you have a podcast, you have to have somewhere to host your podcast, so that you could use like WordPress, you can use Buzzsprout, you can use Anchor. These are all 3 different podcast hosting, and you can pick one that fits you. So the podcast hosting holds all of your podcast episodes, and that's where you get a thing called an RS feed. So the RS feed is where all your podcast episodes are. And depending on your podcast hosting, you can have a website. They might create that for you so that people can just click on that website, but they can click on different icons to get on one of your episodes. So if they like Apple Podcasts better, they can click on the Apple Podcast icon and they can go on that. But if they like, let's say Google Podcasts, if they have a Samsung, they can go on that. So that's how that works. Maybe I might make an episode, or not episode, this is YouTube. Sorry, but I might make a video showing you guys how to start a podcast with Buzzsprout, because if you do have a consistent income, it's pretty good. Like you can get it for cheap for you. For me, it's not cheap, but yeah, because I really do love podcasting, and that's why I'm still gonna do it on here. And I know that this is what God is calling for me to do this podcast. And I know people have told me like, your podcast really helped me. And I want to continue to interview people and have people on and even build a team. So we're not going to give up on this. So last year, I didn't really post anything. And in the beginning of this year, I was doing really good. Like for the first time, I was consistent. Like I had it every single Monday. I was posting an episode. But then, like I said, the end of the month happened. So I wasn't able to post any episodes because I was so busy. And I didn't have the money. So my podcast got suspended. And so after that, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this podcast. And then I was reminded I can put it on YouTube. YouTube is a free platform. I know how to edit videos. I love editing videos. I've done that since I was little. And so this could really work. And I think that I can do even more with YouTube. than I could have done with my podcast on the podcast hosting. So that's why I'm so excited for this, and it's just going to be amazing. I already know it is. If you guys are new and you never listened to my podcast, basically the purpose and the mission of the podcast is just to spread the truth about Christianity and just build a community of people who are God lovers, and they want to seek God with everything, and they want to just be consumed with him, and people who are ready to learn. And I want to bring people on from all kinds of different backgrounds and all kinds of things, and I just want to bring them on so that we can all point you guys to Jesus and all point you to healing and freedom. Like, I want you guys to come to my podcast with your brokenness and then come out with 100% freedom. And I know that some of those things, they take time, but I want to bring awareness and I want to bring truth, because like there's a quote, but it's also Bible verse, the truth will set you free. And so I'm just so excited. There's just so much freedom just knowing that, just hearing people's testimony, like hearing what God's brought them through brings us hope and makes us feel like, you know what, if God did that for them, then God can do it for us. Testimonies are a big part of this podcast. And so I really want you guys to be able to share your testimonies on this channel and on the podcast episodes, because like this is how I'm going to do it on here. So there's going to be, maybe on Mondays, there'll be podcasts, and then on Fridays, it'll just be like a regular YouTube video. So that's what I'm planning, and I'm going to be praying about, but I think that that's how I want to do it. And so then you guys can get even more content. You could share your testimony video form or audio form, and I'm going to be praying about that and seeing how I want to go about that. Maybe you guys could just DM me videos on my Instagram. And for people who want to do the audio, they can email me voice memos of their testimony. This is going to be our community. This is not just for me to listen to myself or just for me to see myself on the video and be like, oh, look what I'm doing. That's not what it's for. This is for you guys, and I want to serve you guys. So if you ever have comments, suggestions, anything, just comment that down. And I will be willing to make videos for you guys that you really want. And that if you don't understand something, I'm here. I can help you understand it. And if I don't know myself, then I can bring people on who do know. And I can pray about it. So, of course, I'm human and I don't know everything. But if there's anything that you need, I'm going to be here for you guys. I have some amazing guests that I have in mind. And I just can't wait for you guys to hear their insight and their wisdom. And I can't wait for you guys to learn all about God and just learn about who he created you to be. And that I just can't wait to see and hear your testimonies of what you guys get out of this channel. And so I'm super excited for all of this. It's gonna be so amazing. Like I said, I know I keep saying that, but like I was really upset before. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not gonna be able to do this podcast anymore. But God reminded me, like, this is not the only way, Malia. There's other ways to still do this podcast. So no matter what obstacle gets in the way, we're still going to do it. Either way, a lot of things didn't go as planned. For February, for this month, I really wanted to do like a series on love. I wanted to talk about what biblical love is. I wanted to have people on talking about marriage and talking about kingdom marriage. I wanted to talk about so many things, relationships and friendships. But like I said, it didn't go as planned. A lot of things happened that was unexpected, but they were God things. And so I'm really thankful for everything, because I know that even though the things that I planned didn't go exactly how I wanted it to, I know that God's plans are going to reign, and it's going to be amazing. Like, he's going to establish my steps, and I'm going to be guided by him. Like, there's been moments these couple months that I've really just been so distracted with what's in front of me, and I lost focus on God. But every time I do that, God just draws me closer and closer to him. And I'm like, okay, God, I'm sorry, let's do this. Like, I'm not gonna get distracted. And it's so easy to, because there's so many things you could focus on. You could focus on the gossip and drama around you. You could focus on your circumstances. You could focus on your dreams that aren't even God ordained. You can focus on so many things that aren't of God. But I'm going to choose to focus on what God is calling for. And it's crazy because I didn't want to start a podcast in the first place. I did not even like podcasts all like that. Like, now I love podcasts and I love podcasting. Like, but for one, I didn't like my voice, so I didn't want to hear myself on the podcast episodes. Like, I didn't want to even talk and hear myself on the headphones. And I like video style. Like I said, I'm a visual learner, but I'm learning how to learn just through people speaking and through podcasts. Alright guys, so for a second the audio kind of cut out and the video cut out at the same time. So I don't know what that was about, but like I said, we're going to keep on doing this and it's going to be amazing. So this is kind of my plan for this YouTube channel. Like I said, Mondays will probably be podcast days, and then Friday will be like a more of a personal style not episode. I'm not podcasting. I am, but I'm not. Fridays will be more of like a personal video. So maybe it might be like a Sunday reset, or just sharing some of my struggles, or creating a morning routine that's rooted in God. Different things like that. So I just want to give you that heads up and let you know what that's going to look like. And I'm going to continue to pray about it and see what God wants out of it. But I know that whatever happens is going to be amazing. And YouTube is so much easier. YouTube is so much easier to work. And so it's going to be awesome. And like I said, I just know that things are going to work out for God's plan. Before I go, I just want to say thank you so much for being patient with me, because I know that since I started the podcast, it has been inconsistent. It's been crazy. It just hasn't been exactly what I wanted it to be and how I knew it should have been. So thank you for being patient with me, and I'm going to continue to make sure that I give you guys good content, and I make sure that I'm consistent no matter what's going on in my life, and like making time for it, because I know that a lot of craziness can happen, but right now I want to make you guys a priority along with school and with my family. And of course, God, He trumps all of that. Like, these past couple years have been years where I've been really inconsistent and just tossed to and fro with the wind. Like, I haven't been rooted. And that's kind of funny that I say that, because I actually have a devotional coming out called Rooted, and talking about being rooted in God's Word. I'm hoping that I can get that out by March, but I can't wait to share more about that process and why I'm even publishing a devotional and getting that out to you guys. But these past couple of years have been years where I wasn't really rooted in God, like in His Word, yes, but I don't know, like I've been kind of not consistent. So I'm not going to just serve God in my peak times. I'm going to serve Him all the time. So I might even share a little bit more about that, because for me it was so hard to be consistent for a while. And I realized that's because, well, I feel like my life hasn't been consistent for a very long time. It was hard to find balance in everything that I do and just be rooted. I used to be so consistent in so many different things, but eventually I fell away from those things. But this channel and my relationship with God is not going to be like that anymore. I'm praying that sharing these type of things with you and just being truthful and raw about my struggles and about the things God has brought me through, I'm praying that that will not only create inspiration in you and create people who move. Like, I was reading about Nehemiah, I'll share that in a minute, but I just pray that it also encourages me sometimes to really stay rooted and not just be reactive, because I used to be like that. I used to react to my situations and be the type of person who, if things were going good, me and God were good. But if things were going bad, I was kind of backing away. I need to really do better. Like, I'm realizing how my relationships with other people are kind of showing up in my relationship with God. And so that's what I'm working on right now. Just making sure that I'm rooted in God, and that that I stand firm on my relationship with God. I don't walk away so easily. Because like I said, God always draws me back, but I don't want there to be any more Him having to draw me back. I just want to stand firm in Him and him alone. That's what we're gonna do. So if you're in the same boat, we can do it together, and we're gonna stay consistent. Back to what I was saying about Nehemiah. So I was reading Nehemiah, and I was just reading his prayers, and I was like, wow, this is so powerful. Like, he was weeping over these people, and he was interceding for the people, and I was just like, wow, like, that's just so powerful. But then he goes up to the king, and God's favor is just following him. So the king is approving of what Nehemiah is asking for. But the thing is, Nehemiah first went to the king, like the king above the king, which is God. And so he had God's favor first. So then he had the favor of the king. So then he had the favor of all these people. So when he spoke, people started to move. Like, people started to get encouraged and inspired, and they started to build. They started to build the wall. I want to have that same Nehemiah authority, that when I speak, I encourage, and when I speak, people begin to move, and people begin to build, and people begin to do what God is calling for them to do. You guys need to read Nehemiah, but I got my highlighter, I got my post-it notes, and I was highlighting the mess out of Nehemiah because it was so good. As far as the podcast episode, I still have a podcast episode for you guys. I posted it on my Instagram that I was doing an episode about letting go of unforgiveness. And that was really fitting for that week, because that week I actually spoke to somebody who hurt my family. And that was his sentencing. So he's in jail now. We were able to make statements and speak up for the people who weren't there, and even speak up for ourselves, just say whatever we want to say in that moment. And so I got to speak to him, and it was a crazy experience. I'm not going to share too much about it today because I want to save that for the podcast episode. But guys, subscribe if you want to hear it, because I will be talking about it soon and letting go of unforgiveness. But it was a crazy day. That day was an emotional roller coaster, because in the beginning of the day, we didn't really know what time the sentencing was. But after we went to the courtroom, and we had to wait for like hours for them to actually start the sentencing, I was in the courtroom and I was comprehending what was happening, and I was like, wait a minute, today's the day. I haven't seen this guy in a year, and today we're gonna be able to speak to him and see him for the first time. And I was like, wait a minute. I did not comprehend it. I knew the sentencing was coming up for a week, but I guess in my mind, I wasn't thinking about what was happening. So we sat in that courtroom for hours. I was getting nervous, getting emotional, and all kinds of different things. And when I got into the room and I saw him, he came in smiling and joking around. I sat in my seat, and all these emotions started to swell up inside of me, and I'm starting to get frustrated. I'm starting to get upset again. I'm starting to feel overwhelmed and anxious. But as I was sitting in my seat, words were just downloading in my head. Like, I knew exactly what I needed to say. I went up there, and all the words that were downloading in my head, I said to him. And I'm not going to tell you yet. I'm telling you, I'm going to tell you and letting go of unforgiveness. But I spoke, and everything that was downloading, I said. I was crying. I was shaking. But I spoke so clearly, and I looked him in his eyes, and I told him. And for a while, it was hard for me to look people in the eyes that looked like him. But I looked him in the eyes, and I started to speak. I started to speak for my brothers. I started to speak for my sister. I started to speak for me and my family, because my brothers weren't there, but someone needs to speak up for them as well. So I spoke for them, and though I was shaking and though I was crying, like, my words, they were sharp and they were clear. And so it wasn't out of a place of frustration or anger anymore. It was more out of a place of hurt. And it was out of a place of, you need to know how this affected us. You need to know that this is not a joke, that you hurt your family. So that was a crazy day. And when I sat back in my seat, I remembered what I was reading that morning. I was reading Jeremiah, and I was reading about how God was telling Jeremiah, I will put my words inside of you. He was like, I'm too young to speak. And God was like showing him visions and being like, I will put my words inside of you. And so I realized that in that moment, God was downloading those words. They weren't just coming from my own head. God was downloading all the words that I needed to say. Before we went to that courtroom, I had no idea what I was going to say. But when I sat down, everything that I needed to say was in my head. I walked up there speaking so clear, so sharp, through tears and through shaking, through anxiousness, through fear. And so I'm reminiscing on how that's amazing, because when I think about how I was last year, I was so anxious. I was so fearful. It was so hard for me to confront people. It was so hard for me to speak up. It was hard for me to talk in my podcast. It was hard for me to even make friends. It's still a little hard for that. But it was hard for me to talk to people, even at church, because I had so much anxiety and I had so much fear and so many thoughts that overwhelmed my head. But that day, although I was nervous, although I was anxious, I stood up there and I realized that I am fearless. And so that whole week before, I wanted to make an episode called Fearless, talking about how when I was young, I was fearless. I didn't care about consequences. I just did things because I knew that I was going to be okay. Like, I jumped off of cliffs and monkey bars and barns, not thinking about what would happen if I fell or hurt myself. I just did it. I was fearless. And just thinking about how easy it was to talk to people when I was young, how easy it was to just be me because I was fearless, how easy it was to talk, how easy it was to just talk about how I felt. I was fearless. And so when I left that place, I was like, I'm fearless. And I started to smile because I was like, God created me fearless. Like, all this fear and anxiety that I used to have, it's gone. And though sometimes I feel fear on the inside, I'm still able to move and push past that fear. And God is able to give me peace and calm that. So that whole day, although in the beginning it was kind of weird and nerve-wracking, joyful, and then frustrating, and all these different emotions, I got home happy, joyful. It was such a good day. God moved in there, and he showed me something about the growth that has happened in a year and how I've just been transformed by him. Like, this has not happened on my own doing. If I was just on my own, I would be so anxious right now. I would live in fear. I would never do anything. I would never take risks. I would never make a YouTube channel. I would never make a podcast, never speak. Like, I would speak, but never speak on here. I would never share my testimonies. I would feel so alone. But because of God, I'm fearless. Because of God, I have this overwhelming peace. Because of him, I know that whatever happens, I'm going to be protected. And if I keep my focus on him, anxiety, it can't come near me. Like, it's like when Peter was walking out to Jesus, as soon as he took his eyes off of Jesus, he began to sink. He began to sink. And that's the same with us. When we take our eyes off of Jesus, we begin to sink back into that anxiety. We begin to sink back into that fear. We begin to sink back into our old habits and our old lifestyle. But when we keep our eyes on Jesus, we walk on water. That's impossible. No. With Jesus, nothing is impossible. We begin to walk fearless, and we begin to walk in freedom and authority. We begin to walk places where nobody's walked before. We begin to walk places that we never thought we would walk before. Because our eyes are on Jesus. Because we are keeping our eyes on him. There's so many things that we can look at. We can look at these huge waves that are warring, these huge things. We can look at Corona. We can look at people dying. We can look at diseases and cancer. And we can look at all these things in the world, and we can say there's nothing we can do about it. And we can sink into depression because our world is full of so much pain and so much hate. So we begin to sink in depression because we feel hopeless, because we feel like we can't move forward. We begin to sink into numbness because we've been hurt so many times that now we can't feel anything. Now we can't feel pain. Now we're void to the world. Now we can't see the light anymore. Now we feel like we're not even here. We feel like we're dead, but we're alive. But when we keep our eyes on Jesus, who is the light, we see the light in the world, and we see what he's doing to change things, what he's doing to transform the people around us, even the people who have done really terrible things. He's beginning to transform them. Like Saul, he was someone who was killing and persecuting Jesus, but you know what happened? He became Paul, and he writes so much in the Bible. Like he wrote so much in the Bible, and he did so much in his lifetime to serve God. And so it's easy to look at people and be like, you know what? There's no saving you. You suck. You're a terrible person. You've murdered people. You've hurt so many people. But God, he's a God of transformation, and he can transform your Saul into Paul. He can transform the people around us into Paul. Like we were once Saul and now we're Paul. We were once Jacob and now we're Israel. Like God, he's a God of transformation. When you look all through the Bible, you see that he transforms everything he touches. Everywhere he goes, he transforms those places. And so when we keep our eyes on God, we see the transformation that's happening all around us. But if we take our focus off and we look at all these things in this world, all these things not working out, all these people hurting and dying, we sink. And so keep your eyes on God. Keep your eyes on the transformation, because you know what? Sometimes God traffics in those places, like, you know those things where you just feel so much sympathy for. Maybe that's just me. For me, like, I'm overly sensitive when it comes to people who are hurting or who are in pain, or people without a father or mother. Overly sensitive about children and just all these different things. And so it's easy for me to focus on those things and be like, well, God, what are you doing about this? But a lot of those times, like when you're feeling so deeply about those people, that's where your calling is. Your calling is to speak to those types of people that you're crying over, or pray or intercede for them. Like sometimes you feel deep sadness for a certain type of people or a group of people. In those moments, pray and intercede for them, because that's probably where God wants you to traffic in. That might even just be your calling. Like maybe are you crying because you know that there's so much human trafficking? Maybe God is gonna call you to deliver people from that and bring people out. And our prayers, they're so powerful, even if you're not going in there and bringing women out of that, or even men, because men are a part of that too. Like it's not just women. But if you're bringing people out of that, if you're not bringing people out of that, I'm sorry, you could be praying for them. And those prayers are so powerful. Our intercession is so powerful, because God is going to put people in place to bring deliverance and healing and freedom and so much more. So in that place where you feel so deeply about, that just might be your calling. So guys, I gotta go. My mom's calling me. But thank you so much for watching this video. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.